2, 3. Yeah, that's running all right. Right. You were called up. You said. Sorry.
15th of February, 1940.
Yeah, and where was that you went to?
I went to Aldershot.
Mm.
I did 6 weeks training there, and I was posted from there, from Aldershot. I was taken on to a dispatch riding course at Feltham in Middlesex. I passed out on that, and I was posted to Louth in by Gainsborough in Lincoln. I did a term on that, doing the dispatch riding. From there, I was. Let me see now. I was sent down to Spratton in Northampton. We were 6 weeks under the canvas there, and there was a sergeant major there, Sergeant Major Normoyle, who'd done 17 years out in India. He wanted to make me up to corporal as in charge of 8 dispatch riders who were there. But unfortunately, his idea of this was not agreed upon by the higher authority, and therefore I remained as I was. But from there I was sent down to Northampton, and I finished the training, further training there for the North African campaign.
How did you feel about being called up? Were you sort of...
Oh no, I really looked forward to this, because all my friends had gone, you see. All my friends had gone locally, all the young lads had been called up in the militia, as were younger than I were, as were 12 months younger than I, had been called up in the 1st militia in the June of 1939. And I was left on my own, more or less, with all my friends had gone. So therefore I wanted to get in, I couldn't get in quick enough, trying to meet them again, you see. But that didn't happen, because I had to wait until the 15th of February for me to go. And we got this embarkation notice that we should be leaving on an advance party to North Africa. 30 of us. There's 30 of us going on an advance party to North Africa, along with 2,000 Australians. There's 30 British and 2,000 Australians. Well, we went from Liverpool on the HMS Scythia. We called it Freetown. We weren't allowed to embark there because they called it the White Man's Grave. And these locals used to swim upside of the ship, and they used to dive for bright coloured coins which we could chuck in there. We used to wrap them in silver paper halfpennies and drop them in the water, and used to dive for them, and they used to oysters, bananas up, and we used to pull them up through the porthole. On a string, we used to pull them up through the porthole into the ship. We then we had a little damage done to the ship. I don't know what really happened, but we had to go into Cape Town for repairs. We're in Cape Town for 3 days. We're not allowed to embark at Cape Town. So we sat that out, and eventually we arrived in Durban. Well, in Durban, we were given a few hours freedom, and as we stepped off the ship, there was cars lined up there waiting for all us, or any of us, no matter who it was, to get into the cars. They'd take us anywhere. And they took us first of all to a local bar, and sherry and all that type of wines and liquors was threepence a glass. But they told us to keep off the cheap stuff, as it was very, very potent stuff, and we should be under the weather. Anyway, that's what eventually happened. We did get under the weather. And on the way back from there, back to the ship, there's possibly a gang of us, about 6 of us. We decides to go back by rickshaw, back to the ship. Anyway, we gets into this rickshaw, and well, there wasn't sufficient room in the rickshaw for 6 of us, so they decided to get 2 rickshaws. So we get 2 rickshaws, 3 in one, 3 in the other, and we're charging down the road with this fella in front of us, wearing his horns, and he's all dressed up in all his regalia, and away we're going down the road, and suddenly we decides, whew, he's not going fast enough. So we stops the rickshaws, pulls these out of the shafts and puts those in the back, and we start to dress up and get in the shafts ourselves. 2 of us in the shaft. Decides to have a race back to the ship. Well, there we were, racing down this road, going like the devil, till we collided, and the wheels got interlocked and ripped the wheels off and tipped all these lads out of the damn thing. Anyway, they decided we got to pay for these wheels and got to pay for the rickshaws and all the rest of it. Well, one of the lads was still wearing all the regalia. And we stole this, and left them stranded there on the road, and we went into the ship with all this. We put this, and we were keeping these for keepsakes, you see. Anyway, we thought we were free from this, but however, later in the day, or the following day, we were taken before the captain of the ship, that we had caused a nuisance to ourselves and broken rickshaws up, and we should not be allowed off the ship while the term of repairs was being done in Cape Town. We should have to remain where we were. However, we didn't stay there long. We were in there about 2 days, I think, and our enjoyment was all taken away through this occurrence. We had to wash the sides of the ship down in the galley, to wash all the ships down. This is what they kept us on for the 2 days. However, we carried on, and we eventually landed up into Port Said. They took us to a place called El Tahag, which hadn't been started as a camp then. We had to erect all the camp, the tents and everything to commence this camp, as was later in the war was a very, very big camp, which was El Tahag, right close to Ismailia. There we were issued out with winter clothing, of all things. Issued out with winter clothing. We wondered where the devil we were going, as we were issued out with these very heavy clothing. And we thought, well, this is not necessary for where we are going, up the desert, which is very, very warm, as we thought. But at night time it went bitterly cold. And on the 24th of December, this was possibly 3 months from when we left England, we were in combat. And we started at Sidi Barrani on the 24th of December 1940. We commenced the push then from there, and we were with the 30,000 Wavell, General Wavell's lot of 30,000.
Do you remember what regiment you were with?
I was with the Service Corps of the service. What was it? It was the Service Corps of the First Army. Of the First Army.
And you were a trooper or a...
No, I was a driver.
A driver.
A driver. I was in the RASC. I was a driver at that time. I'd finished as I'd taken a motorcycle over, and the number of the motorcycle was 13913. C13913. That was the 13. Number 13 always came up during my life through the war. Number 13. And I always used to term this as a very unlucky omen. But it didn't turn out to be a very unlucky. And we started, as I say, on the 24th of December. And I was with a Chevrolet, driving a Chevrolet vehicle, a Canadian Chevrolet. On this, it was draped a cardboard tank. On the top of this lorry was draped a cardboard tank. And there was others behind, all types of things, so everything made of cardboard. To make the enemy think we had a great deal of ammunition and armour coming up, but there wasn't, there was nothing. And we went through Sidi Barrani as though there was nothing there at all. It was just like going through just ordinary village. And we came upon the crack Alpine division of the Italian Alpine division, which retreated before we had time to get to them. They were fleeing, and we hardly saw sight of a sound of them. But they left booby traps behind, same as fountain pens, vacuum flasks, all types of cigarette cases. These types of booby traps that were meant for us to pick up, and then they'd blow your hand off if you picked them up. But we were warned against this, and we left them where they were. But that's when I started to collect various things I decided to take back as war mementos. And I picked up feathers out of the Alpine feathers. I picked putties, several things, and kept stuffing them into my kit bag. And eventually we carried on and carried on and carried on.
What was it like, the weather?
The weather was very, very nice, but went bitterly cold in the evening. And they issued us out with a bivouac, which was supposed to house two. But they wasn't big enough to take two, so most of the fellas either slept in the lorry or slept one in the bivouac. Well, most of the fellas then, being fresh from England, as you might say, were all like kind of apprehensive of what was going on, and were a little nervous, I should say. I was nervous. I was nervous of what to expect, and you were kind of afraid to sleep on your own in a bivouac then. And then as time progressed, we went farther afield. Then we began to get farther into battle, and you came across the soldier that had been killed, the Italians that were killed, and it was your job then to go out on burial parties in which to bury these people. But funnily enough, you didn't do this. The tracks of your vehicle across the desert were making so much of an indention into the sand that it wasn't necessary to bury them, dig holes. You just chuck them into the indentions as you made by the vehicle, and just scrape them over with the top of the sands as you'd made, as the tracks had made.
You'd be going west.
We were travelling then. We were travelling west towards Derna, towards Saloom and Derna, and on the coast road. We were making his way then towards, well, as far as wherever we could get. You see, toward pushing the Italian back. Then
You hadn't seen any of the Afghans?
Oh no, there was no Germans then. There was no Germans at this period, as I'm talking about. And we came across the Bedouin troops, the Bedouin tribes, and we had a few meals with those, and they were all out for robbing you of your tea and chocolate, whichever you may have. And they used to come out, these young girls, you sang the young girls out to you, and they were, they were terrible, these girls were. They possibly wouldn't be above 8-year-old, 10-year-old. And they were all sewed, all the mouths, the eyes and everything were all sewed up. And they used to come and say, bakshish, bakshish, and invite you back to their place to possibly to relieve yourself or have intercourse with them as only 8-year-old. Which you didn't do this. Well, at least I didn't. And then we should have helping with those. They'd help us out, give us a few meals or something. And we still kept going on, carrying on, and driving by day and sleeping by night, until we arrived at Saloom, on the escarpment of Saloom. This was where we first saw all the Italian prisoners had been captured, and they'd been taken. I think it must have been an island division as had captured them there, because they were Scotch people.
Do you want one of these? Have one of these. I've got some more.
Have you? I think they were Scotch people, because there was the Scotch that were guarding these. And oh, sorry. From then on, we knew that there was one aircraft alone at Saloom Airport. One aircraft. We had one aircraft in the Middle East with us then. One aircraft. And we continued on from there till eventually we got to Derna. Well, in Derna, it was a beautiful town or city, whatever it is. It's a town, I think it is. It was beautiful there. We spent a week there, and we thought we were in holiday making in the damned south of France. This is what we thought. It was so peaceful there. And then we carried on to Tobruk, and we still keep pushing on and pushing on and pushing on, until we got to this little place called, I know it was well out up the coast road. It was about 9 kilometres from Sirte, a place called Sirte. And at night time, we used to have fresh water to make a cup of tea, which was carried on the water vehicle. All of the tea as was drank then was seawater, which had been possibly distilled, but used to turn your milk curdly. You used to curdle your milk in your tea. But we weren't allowed fresh water, only off the water vehicle. And you weren't allowed that, actually, if they'd have known, because there was no water holes. And this particular night, it was my turn to go out to get the fresh water from the water vehicle. When it went very, very dark at night time, and we dug down into the desert, down into the sand. We dug right down, I should say about 8 feet square, nice big hole in the ground. It used to house possibly about 8 of us. And we were sitting there at night time where we could have a smoke, because there was no all lights and everything was forbidden. And we used to put a little tent over the top. And it was my turn to go out this night to fetch the water. And I went out, and we used to have to count the paces from when you come out to the water vehicle and count your paces back, and then you know where you were, because it was that dark you couldn't see where you were. Well, this particular night, I went out for the water. I found the water vehicle all right, which was 22 paces I'd taken to the water vehicle. I'd taken the water from out off the vehicle, and returning with this, and I counted 22 paces back, but I wasn't where I was supposed to be. So then I decided to take 10 paces to the right. I did 10 paces to the right, still nowhere. So I did 10 paces to the left again to bring me back where I originally started, and then take 10 paces to the left to find out. Well, I got so confused with this that I lost myself completely, and I was wandering then that night, still clutching this 4-gallon water carrier, still clutching this, till I eventually wanders into a Bedouin camp, which was outside of the area altogether. And I couldn't understand none of the language, and they weren't very pleased with me being there. So they turned me out again, and it eventually ends up onto the main Ajdabiya road, which was the coast road from Tripoli to Ajdabiya. Well, as I'm walking along, I come along a milestone, and the moon had come up by this time. Couldn't see the camp, and I walked up, and it said 23 kilometres. I shall never forget this. It said 23 kilometres to Ajdabiya. So I knew, as we passed this as I thought we'd passed this sign, 23 kilometres, when we'd first gone up there. So I starts to walk back. Thought, well, I'd walk back, and I walked to the next signpost, to the next milestone or kilometre, whatever it was. And I was still farther away than ever. However, by the time I did get back, I was kind of, what shall I say, hysterical kind of thing, being out on my own through that night and imagining all manner of things. Anyway, I did eventually get back into camp, and they put me under sedation, and
it was very cold, I think.
Oh, it was bitterly cold, yeah. And they put me under sedation. However, I got around that. And then 2 or 3, but every time you got your meal from there, being in the open air, when you went down for breakfast in the morning, you went down with your Dixie can, and you'd go down and you get whatever was going, and you immediately, they put it in, you had to cover it up like that, because there was those many flies that used to fly straight onto it and blacken it. They used to take it away from you. And this particular morning, I had my toast with it. They give toast, and one of these damn, we used to call them shite beetles we had, came buzzing down just like damn stuckers, and whipped it straight away from you. Took it straight away.
What, a beetle?
Like a flying beetle, we call them. They were like, what's the hell? What size were they? Like a sparrow. And from that, if you didn't cover your meals up, if you didn't cover them up at all, it was gone before you had time to eat them. And we had a little leisure time through the day because we were expecting them. Mind you, we'd be getting dive bombed. We were getting dive bombed by stray planes as were coming over.
Italian or German?
No, German, which were, I think, which were the advance party of the German army. I think these were the advance party of the Germans, reconnoitring, I think, because we weren't far from the salt flats, you see, from 30 salt flats we weren't, and our tanks had gone up through there and got fast in the salt lakes, and a certain percentage of our troops had gone over there on tank recovery, and Frank Bailey, I think, was in the tanks. He was in the tanks. Well, I never met him then at that time. And we were sent out from there. There was 6 of us and a sergeant. We were sent to meet a long-range desert patrol to find out what was happening to the tanks that was found in the what were fastened into the salt lakes. We met this long-range desert patrol, and they told us that on the 22nd of February, Germans had landed in Tripoli. So then the report came back when we got back to say that the Germans had definitely landed in Tripoli and were advancing towards us, which was, I should say, about 20 or 30 miles away. But we couldn't get over the salt lakes, you see, and our idea then, well, if we couldn't get over the salt lakes, the Germans definitely couldn't get over the salt lakes coming from the other side. We thought they couldn't come. But however, we were really taken to, because as I say, on the 1st of April, they started to send all the heavy stuff back what they'd got, sending it in preference to us. All heavy stuff was to go first, and they came to us and said it was a disorganised retreat, every man for himself. So then that's when we started the great trek back. Our lines of communication had been that long. We'd travelled right the way from Sidi Barani right the way up to Sirte, which is to say must have been 1,500, 2,000 miles, and with nothing behind us and nothing in front of us. And I think that was where the General Wavell slipped up, I think, because his lines of communication were too long. And we started to set back then, start on a disorganised retreat. And you were going back, you'd go possibly 5 miles, you'd see a vehicle abandoned, you'd jump into that and see if it'd start, and you did eventually find something, and you were with anyone. Didn't matter who you were, anyone was jumping on your vehicles and you were going back. And we came through Barchi, and Barchi, as I previously told you, was the supply depot for all the petrol that was used for the vehicles up there. And their idea was to destroy everything as you left it. As you came through it, destroy it. Same as we destroyed all the water wells that we had known. We were poisoning them, pouring diesel oil in them, and which was to slow the Germans' advance. However, we went through Dirty and through Barchy, and this was all in flames. This was all in flames, and we still kept coming towards Derna. Kept travelling on towards Derna. And when we got within a few miles of Derna, we were stopped by these redcaps. As said, Derna was occupied. Derna is occupied, and you must go south into the desert for 20 kilometres into the desert and strike off to Brook. So naturally, we swung out into the desert, off the road, off the coast road, and swung into the desert to travel south, 20 kilometres. Well, we did. We travelled south all right, but we were running into the Germans, which had already got over the salt lakes. They'd already got over the salt lakes and coming over the tanks and the motorcycle sections and what have you. They came, and we were virtually into a pincer movement.
And so the Red Caps?
The Red Caps were, we found out virtually later that they were Germans that were posing as British, whereas I've taken no notice of those and gone through, we should have been all right. But however, at this particular time, I was driving a food lorry. When I Canadian chef, still a Canadian chef, loaded with food. Cigarettes, Viceroy they were, and all man, and I was driving it. And a few ambulances with us, plus General Connor, General Parry, another general was with us, with a big ACV vehicle, and they were all inside this.
You were in a sort of convoy of vehicles.
Quite a few of us, yes. At this time, there's quite a few of us. All in it is organised, but running anyhow. We weren't under no military orders whatsoever, only as a disorganised retreat. And you were just running along with anyone who was available, anyone who was there. But at the same time, this General Parry and General O'Connor, they were also with us. But they were in a big armoured vehicle, an ACV vehicle, which was called, with the flags on the top flying up. And the first we knew of being taken prisoner was that they stopped the vehicles directly in front of us. About 4 ambulances, I think there was. And they spread over the roofs of the ambulances. They put out the white flag with a red cross on it to say that it was an ambulance section that was there. There was an ambulance section there. That was the 3rd Light Field Infantry. That was. I remember that. That was the 3rd Light Field Infantry, and 3rd Light Field Ambulance. 3rd Light Field Ambulance. And it didn't make any notice. There was aircraft coming over and it was strafing us and all this manner or the other. And then Rommel came along in an open car, chauffeur driven, and he stood up and he said, "For you the war is over." This was about 11 o'clock in the morning. The sun brightly shining down, and we said, "For you the war is, for us the war is over." We couldn't realise this as we were taken prisoner. And he said, "Well, within 6 weeks," he says, "we shall have taken Alexandria." He says, "and within 6 months you'll be all reunited with your families." Well then, when we knew we were taken prisoner, the first thing we did was to load our kit bags up out of the vehicles I was driving with cigarettes and tea and different things. We loaded up. And then they put us into a...
There wasn't any fighting at all? There was
Very, very little fighting at that time. There may have been a few odd machine guns going and a few odd rifles and so on, but not a great deal. There was no bombing, a little air strafing, but nothing really to worry about. One or two did get killed, but it was, I think it was really just to keep a check on everything, just to make sure that they didn't turn out anything. But however, they made us disarm. We had to throw as a revolver. I was carrying a revolver strapped down to my knee, which was on my knee for driving purposes. It was on like strapped onto my leg, and I had to just throw that away and to empty me bullets out of my belt and tip them in the ground. And then they marched us all up with his hands in the air, and they put us all into one big circle in the desert there. And I should say there must have been about 700 of us, I should say. But then, once we were inside this, all consolidated together, they put little stones right in a circle all the way around us. And that was where we got to stay. We hadn't got to get over the stones, and there's tanks trained onto us, all the way around us. There was tanks trained on us, guards walking all around. And if you'd have strayed over these stones that they put round, then they would have shot you. There was Gurkhas with us, there was Indians with us, there was all manner of people with us. Now, as I'd said earlier, we'd poisoned all the water wells coming away. As we'd retreated, we'd poisoned all the water wells. Therefore, there was no water. There was no water for the Germans, no water for us, no water for anyone. So, consequently, what was happening? We couldn't get no water. We couldn't get no food, because what food was on our vehicles, the Germans had captured, because they were short of food, and therefore they had the priority of it. So we had nothing, and went 2 or 3 days, I should say, without anything, where our lips began to crack, tongues began to swell to fill your mouth up, and Indians, there was a few Indians there, when they urinated into the water bottle, and were drinking that. After they made the urine and put it into the water bottle, they were drinking this, and it was making them worse. And some of those poor chaps, they died. They were left out onto the desert, and there was all manner of flies and things all eating them away. We were on there 5 days, and in that 5 days we had 1 tin of McConaughey's between 3.
What was McConaughey?
A tin of McConaughey's. It was called a tin of McConaughey's, which would like the size of a vegetable soup, as you can get today. A tall tin of vegetable soup as you can buy out of the supermarket. It's about the same size. I'd say about 12-ounce tin between 3.
And what was in it? Meat or something?
Yes, it was like a vegetable soup.
Oh, I see.
But it was made by McConaughey's, and we always call it McConaughey's because it was made by McConaughey's. We used to call it McConaughey's. And then these guards could see that there was a chance of making some money and robbing you of all what bit of wealth you've got. And I bargained. I had my wife, is now my girlfriend then, had given me a signet ring to go away with her initial on it. HB had got on the initial. I had that, I had a wristwatch, I had fountain pens, I had all manner of things, my own personal belongings, which I bartered for 1 cup of water. And you had to hand I wouldn't part with the ring. I had that, eventually I had that taken from me. But I wouldn't part with that. But I got rid of my wristwatch, my fountain pens, and all the personal belongings I had with me. I bartered for a cup of water. And when I tasted the water, I had to throw it away because it was diesel oil. It was contaminated with the diesel oils we'd poured in. So we only got his own back, although the other, all my belongings, not only mine, but dozens of other fellas they'd had. Well, from there, after 5 days, they came and took us in these open vehicles, these troop carriers, to Derna. They took us back to Derna.
So were the Germans or the
This was the
Italians?
Germans then. This was the Germans. They took us then to Derna and handed us over to the Italians at Derna. Now, there was no beds. They shoved us in an old tumble down place where we had to all we had to sleep on was a ground sheet. The camouflage ground sheet, I shall never forget it. It was just a camouflage ground sheet, no covering whatsoever. You got your kit bag for a pillow with what stuff you'd got in it, and you'd still got your army clothing, I would say that, but you'd only got shorts. I had a pair of khaki drill shorts and a shirt and a coat, khaki drill, and they put us there, and there was I was lying by the side of a fella named Sergeant Smith. I don't know where he came from. He was a regular soldier, and I was lying the side of him. And in the morning at 6 o'clock, used to have to go down to the barrel, as we used to call it, the barrel, which was a 50-gallon drum or a 45-gallon drum with the top cut off. You used to have coffee in it, and they used to give us just black coffee in the morning and a lemon. That was at 6 o'clock in the morning. And then at 11 o'clock of the day, at the daytime, they gave us a pagnotti, which was a small piece of bread, which we should say now is one of these little French roll cobs, I think the size of that. It's 11 o'clock. Then at tea time, you had just ordinary water and cabbage water, we used to call it. Well, after 2 days at this place, we all started suffering dysentery. And it's a terrible complaint, that is. And there was no toiletry, nothing of that. You couldn't get a wash, no, you couldn't go to the toilet unless you did it. It was communal in a big trench, and you sat on a pole. Well, after 2 or 3 days of this, you felt as though you were wanting to go to the toilet, but all the time you didn't. There was nothing you could pass, but it was just the mucus coming away from you. Just the whole interior of your inside was coming away from you. Well, this Sergeant Smith is aside of me. He was very, very ill, and he said to me this particular morning, would I collect his rations? And I went for his rations, and I collected his rations. And I went back, and the chap had died. Well, I saw a chance here of seeing him there like that. I saw a chance of getting double rations. If I kept my mouth shut, I should still draw his rations and nobody would be the wiser. Only the fella next to him, the other side. So then we split a bargain between us, as we should draw his rations and eat them between us. Well, there was only a lemon and a little pagnotti. Anyway, after a couple of days of this, with it being so hot, he started to go the wrong way, you see. Started to go off, and there's bloody flies and things crawling up his nostrils, and it was bloody terrible. And we had to tell them about this, you see, and get him removed. He was carted away, and well, there was above him, there was ever so many more as went that way. And we never knew what happened to him. But that was when the first idea of escape came into his mind. And we tried to conceive a plan to get away at night from there, from Derna, and to get over the escarpment to Tobruk. Anyway, we decided on this, and as we'd go. Well, at the time when we were supposed to go, we all felt that weak as we couldn't make it. But this, I think, was the first start of setting ideas of escaping into his mind. Because we realised then there was nothing to live for. We couldn't get home, we couldn't get no news to home, we couldn't get nothing, and we knew full well that we were there until the war was over, and we didn't exactly know what was going to happen to us, as we felt as a real encumbrance to them, because they couldn't look after us, they couldn't even look after themselves, never mind us. And they sent us out from there after 3 or 4 days, I think it was. They sent us out into Derna to clean up Derna town itself, which had been used by us, been used by everyone as had been in there, and it was really in a deplorable state. And there was we were detailed off, I should say, in parties of 6 to go through into Derna to clean the toiletries and the everything, clean the town up itself. And I remember going down this sidewalk, we were walking down, and there was a German guard with us, a young fella, a very, very brash fella, and walking down, and he was singing, making us sing the Fatherland.
Deutschland über alles.
Yeah, Deutschland, Deutschland. He made us sing Deutschland, Deutschland über alles. And we're going down there, and if he didn't sing it, he was prodding you with his bayonet. You know, England is fine under. Do me sing Deutschland, Deutschland über alles. And there we were, Deutschland, Deutschland, doing this. However, when we were going down the road, was one of these little lads, I should say about 40 years of age, came running up and was shouting at us and licking his tongue out and saying English pigs and different things, which, when we were there, we couldn't do enough for them. They couldn't do enough for us, you see. But just because we were on the other side, then they were dead set against us and against the German, you see. He was all for the German then. But this German, he told him to get away, to go, but he wouldn't go. And he shot him in the street. Shot a lad about 14 in the street. Left him lying there. And then we had to go out, and as I say, we cleaned all the toilets out, the offices out, the Germans. From there, we didn't know, we were virtually non-entities. We weren't wanted, no one knew us. And we just took it for granted then. We were there until we could either make a break for it or wait until the war's over before we could get home. But anyway, then, after a few weeks or so, I should say it was, they bundled us all up into these lorries, and away we went. And we're travelling for days and days and days, I should say. We were on these lorries and getting off them at given points, and we were sleeping out at the night. And eventually we landed into Tripoli. Well, we got into this camp in Tripoli, and it was right on the water's edge in Tripoli, and into this camp. And they allowed us to swim in the water. There was barbed wire outside, about 25 yards out, and they allowed us to go into there. But we were there 2 or 3 days until they could sort us all out. eventually they sent us onto working parties. Well, this was my undoing, actually. I think was one of my undoings here, is we came out of there, and they sent me to, and with others, they sent us to a camp that was an ex-army, Italian ex-army post, which dealt with foodstuffs and ammunition. And here they put us in a food store to check all the food and to load it onto vehicles that were coming down from the front, and it was us to load this and up and to send it back in the front. Well, here we decide as now we can do a little bit of sabotage. We had nails, and in this tin fruit, as they used to bring, as it was in there, we kept knocking holes into the tins, in the tops of the tins, to sabotage it, you know. But we thought a better way of doing that was to use knock holes in that and then drink the juice out of it, because we had no openers for anything. We used to drink the juice out of it and put them back in, and there used to be tins of chocolate with brown tape round, round tins of chocolate, and you see chocolate on it, chocolate, and you take the tape off, eat the chocolate inside it, which was a round disc inside, eat that, put it back again, put the tape back on, and this is what we're doing. Until they found out about it, as we were more of a nuisance than any help to them. So they moved us out of there and put us into an old clothing depot of German clothing, which had come, how it had got there I don't know, but it had come from the Russian front. And from the Russian front it had come, and it was our job to sort all this clothing out and put it in different piles, good from the bad. Well, being very inquisitive people, we were going through the pockets of everything. And it was surprising what we found. We found cigarette lighters and pen knives and watches and money and all manner of things. And unfortunately for me, I found an identity disc, a German identity disc. And being what I've told you before, very, very particular in different things I picked up as was saving back for mementos to bring back home, I put this into one of my collections. Took it back to the camp at night time, put it into my kit bag with all the rest of the things I'd picked up during my travel, and I'd got a great hoard of different things, which I thought would have bring back home. Well, periodically, while we were out away at work, in these working parties, they used to have search parties. And this particular day, as we were out, they did have a search party, and they'd come across this identity disc. Naturally, they want to know where it was from. So when we came in at night, all lined up, we had to speak in German. There's 31 of us inside in the party. 31 that was in the party, and we used to have to call out in German. You used to have to rhyme a number off. 1, 3, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You used to have to shout your number out in German. And mine was 31, 31 my number was. And remain where I was. 31 to remain where he was. Everybody else filed in through the camp, and as you went in through the camp gates, you collected your meal as you went in. And I was outside, and I got to go into the camp commandant's office. An interpreter with me. I went in, they wanted to know, first of all, he called me an English swinehund. And he wanted to know where I'd had this identity disc from. Had I killed a German? I'd killed a German, and I was going to suffer his life. I was going to suffer my life for his life. And an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, he was saying. And I couldn't understand a word what he said. I had to be waiting through this interpreting. He was a man of about 5'1". Oh, he was a terrible person, this commandant was. However, I thought it was my day finished, and all I'd got on that particular night was a pair of trunks, just a pair of shorts I'd got on, nothing else. And he said, the interpreter said to me, he said, you've got to go into your camp, take a bath, get your meal, and I'll pick you up again. So he marched me back into the camp. Well, a couple of guards marched me back into the camp. I went and bathed me. Well, a bath was going into the sea and washing you and coming out and having your meal. And then they marched me out back to the camp commandant's office again for sentence. This is what I put it down to. Well, the sentence was that the following morning at daylight, that I should be taken out into the desert with 2 guards, a pick and a shovel. And I went, took me out, early morning, took me out about, I should say, 600, 800 yards away from the camp, out into the desert. And one of the guards marked a space out with his bayonet, just like a grave. I thought, good heavens above. And he says, right, start digging. So then I had to start digging, and they wouldn't let me relax one bit. I had to keep going and going, and it was one of those like heart-shaped spades, great long handle. And I dug and dug and dug and dug. And I thought, well, I'm digging. I expecting when it was deep enough, thought, well, they're going to shoot me in and cover me up. This was what was going through my mind. Anyway, when I'd completed this, he got up and he marched me across, back again to fetch 2 posts. I fetched 2 posts and I had to insert those at the ends of each of the ends of the hole that I'd dug. And I had to fetch another long pole to go across the top. And it turned out it was a bloody latrine. And I thought I was digging my own grave. And it was a latrine. You just have to sit on the pole. And then with all that trouble from there as I had, they moved me from there and sent me to what was called Kilometre 5. Well, here again I had trouble with them. And Kilometre 5 was an ammunition depot plus petrol depot plus diesel and all the matter. A fuel depot it was.
And this is still the Germans?
Still in Germans, which was called it Kilometre 5 because it was 5 kilometres from the camp. And my job there, when I first arrived there, was to wash out the jerry cans. Oh, those thousands and thousands and thousands of jerry cans. You know the old. You remember the jerry can? As you had to shake out and wash the sand out of them. So there was also about 8 men underneath canvas that were filling these cans up with petrol. Prisoners, all filling these cans up with petrol. As they were washed out, so they were taken through, and these were filling them up. I was outside under the burning sun, and this particular day, I don't know why they should pick on me, but anyway, an air raid came. Our planes came over, and the sirens went, and they said you got to take cover. And this German chap came over to me, could speak fairly good English, and he said, oh, he says, your friends are here. I says, yes. I said, I know they are. I said, a bloody good job they are. I said, I hope they blow you and all that bloody lot up to smithereens. Oh, that did it. You wore your identity disc around your neck. So he grabbed my identity disc, had a look at it, took my name off it. Thought, there we go again. Here we are again. Back to the camp at night. Then the same procedure again. Up before the camp commandant. And he called me an agitator. And he says, you don't like the Germans? I said, I don't. I said, I don't like what they're doing here. I said, my main concern is to get away from here. And I should be pleased when everything's over. He says, well, you still be under German rule. So anyway, that passed off. So they decides then to move me from there. And they moved me down onto the docks. Tripoli docks. Working down on the docks. And the same thing happens here. I'm picked up again, but they put me on a lighter. You know these lighters, they go out. The ships couldn't get in. The big ships couldn't get into the Tripoli harbour with the foodstuffs, so it had to be loaded outside from in deep water onto one of these lighters. And the lighter used to bring it into the dock. Well, they put me onto one of these lighters, and I'm there with several other lads. A fellow named of Cox, I think his name was. He came from down Poole in Dorset, and he was being well brought up into this lark with on the Navy larks. He was always living down at Poole. He said, I'll show you how to go on. So they used to send this flour and stuff down in these big skips and big nets. Flowers about 10 weight at a time used to come down onto the lighter, and then we used to have to unload it and stack it up and take it to the dock. Anyway, we had a few words, or we did, down below, to these lads on the top as we loaded it up, and we said, when you put the sling on the hook, don't put it on, just ledge it on the top, and then when he swings out with his crane, with the derrick from the ship, there's one end of it to come off and all tip off in the bloody water. So this is what we did, and everything was coming over. As soon as it come down and he swung it across towards the lighter, off it'd come and all the bloody stuff would shower off into the water, see, and this was sabotage. So they took us off that and put us on the dock side. Well, it was on the dock side as this happened to me. I was wheeling these things on a bag truck into these warehouses, and I'm wheeling this down, and I hear a voice behind me. How are they treating you here? Don't turn around, but how are they treating you here? Oh, I said, not too badly. So, are you feeding you well? Oh, not too badly, quite well. Any cigarettes? No, said, we're not allowed cigarettes. And he says, well, do you want a cigarette? We said, I certainly would. He says, well, when I'm gone, go down to that capstan on the dock side there, and you will find a packet of cigarettes there. Share it out between you. Now, don't look and don't make out you recognised anything. And I kept going, and then I stopped, and he passed me, and as he passed me, he said, British intelligence. British intelligence. And he was dressed as a German officer, some rank, I don't know what he was dressed up in German clothing. So after he'd gone, giving him a chance to go, I goes down to this gaps. I thought, oh, that bug's pulling my leg. But there, true enough, there was the cigarettes and matches, and there we went and smoked and lovely. And we had his meals there, and they kept taking us back to camp. And through this troubles we'd had on the sabotaging the foodstuffs off the ship, they sent 2 of us to what was called the repair shops. Sent us to the repair shops. Well, this was where we could do more sabotage.
The British, the intelligence man, he didn't ask you to do anything.
No, he never asked us didn't ask us to do nothing. Didn't ask me to do anything. He just said, keep walking, don't turn, don't make out as if you've seen anybody. And how are they treating you, and all this, that and the other. Just wanted to know how they were treating us. And as I stopped, he walked past and he said, British intelligence. So that was how I knew he was a British intelligence officer. And the cigarettes were there where he said they were. And they sent me to this repair shop, repair depot. And we started then to put sand in the gearbox. In the gearboxes of these vehicles. Sand in the back axles and sand in the sugar in the tanks. Oh, we were doing all manner of things. Anyway, this didn't last long. They got wise to that, and they said we were nothing but no earthly use to them, and they were going to stop feeding us. And anyway, they took us back to camp, and then in 1942, that we'd been there from about the June, I think. April, May, June, July. Been there from about the July until the following June. We've been there about 12 months, I should say.
Had you met Frank Bailey? Yeah?
No, not met Frank then. Hadn't met Frank then. That was in 1942, when they shipped us then from Tripoli to Palermo in southern Italy, you know, in Sicily. And we got to Sicily. We were there 28 days, and we had to make a camp there, mud camp it was, and they gave us straw on which to put down in the mud, and blankets that were that lousy and filthy you wouldn't credit it. And that was when I first noticed I'd got lice on me. Was in Sicily. I was covered up with one blanket, and I could continually feel this itching on me, and I had a look at myself, and inside my shirt and all inside my seams of my shirt looked like lumps of rice, and it was lice. Oh, bloody terrible! And even in the blanket were thick with them. We're there for a month, and never let us outside of just the camp area. And it was right on the front of Palermo. And then they took us over by ferry over the straits, and we landed into Bari, and we got bombed in Bari. Our planes were bombed, and they bombed the station of Bari when we were in there. And we took shelter underneath the station until the all clear was given, and then we continued on from there up to Capua, a camp called Capua. That was farther up, halfway up. We made camp there. From there, they took us to Cervigliano. Well, in Cervigliano, this is where I first met Frank, was in Cervigliano. And we were put into camp 11, number 11 hut. I was put in, and Frank Bailey, they sorted, you were put in huts in alphabetical order. Well, mine was A and his is B, so there wasn't many A's, so then the B's started coming up, and Frank was next bed to me, in the next block to me. My bed number was 1393. That was another 13 as had arisen in me. My bed number was 1393. And
This was at.
this was in 59, Civigliano.
Ah,
Civigliano in 59.
sorry. Yeah, you were in.
Yes, and then we got
59.
into Civigliano. Bitterly cold, very, very bitterly cold weather. And this is the first time that I'd seen sheets issued out to prisoners of war. They issued us out with 2 blankets and 2 sheets. And immediately we saw this, we thought, good heavens above, we're going to be like VIPs here. Sheets and blankets. And when we got in these, you couldn't get warm. And there was no food that night we arrived there. They couldn't fix us up with anything. We had to wait until the following morning. And then we're all sorted out and put into these various huts. And I was, as I say, I was in number 11. And we rose early in the following morning. They brought us the black coffee. Oh, we didn't bring it. Oh, yes, they did. Yes, they brought the black coffee. They brought it virtually round to your bed. They brought it round to your bed, and we thought, oh, we're doing really lovely. This can last, this can. Oh, this is champion. Tea in bed and prisoners of war, we thought, oh, very, very nice. And they also said there would be 35 cigarettes issued to you. Very, very nice. So, there was 35 cigarettes, and they were called Popolari. Well, that was all right until the food lark came. Then you had 1 piece of bread the size of a matchbox, a lemon, still a lemon, and nothing else until night time. And then you had to queue up, and there was 2,000 of us in this camp, and you had to queue up, and there was 2 men with 2 big barrels, 4 ladles. No, there's 2 men at each barrel, 4 ladles, and you went in columns of 2 up to these barrels. And as you went out with your Dixie, you just flopped it in like this, and it splashed over the side, and you just virtually drank it like that. And you walked out, and as you went past, so everybody started queuing up again, waiting to go round again, in case there was any left, what we used to call backups. Well, there was never any backups, only what was left on the floor, and then they started grovelling for that in the sand. And then this is when we all started. Once we'd got settled in there, there was some of the fellas as were decided to, as we'd have 1 hut, number 13 hut that was, left entirely for anyone who's wishing to take up dancing or learning to read or learning another language and learning to box and all a sports, like a sports room it was. And this is where we started to take an interest in ourselves, because we'd lost all interest previously, and we started taking interest in ourselves as we had access to water and to clean ourselves up, and we had access then in which we had everything there as we could write home. He gave us a letter card and a card which we could write per week, and we could write home, and that was everything. And then we started to receive the mail, you see, incoming mail. We could get that, and then things started to seem better. Well, after so long, people began to think, well, this is no life here, because there was nothing, there was no shows, no nothing. You had to make your own enjoyment what there was, and you were playing bridge or cards or reading, and you had a walk out every month. They took you out for a walk out in the countryside for a month, once a month, and people were getting really frustrated then in their own minds, as they had forgot the time, the dates, and everything. Then they had forgotten because there was no form of calendar and no form of communication outside whatsoever. There was no new intakes of prisoners to bring any new news in. So then the Red Cross parcels started to come in. And when the Red Cross parcels started to come in, we were getting really good food then through the Red Cross parcels. But we couldn't boil anything up, you see. We hadn't got no facilities in which to boil, make tea or anything, to boil the water. So there was one brainy lad there, his name was Bailey, but they used to call him Bill Bailey, but his name was Frank Bailey, just the same as Frank Bailey's is now, but his Bailey was spelt different than what that Bailey is. His was B-A-I-L-E-Y, and his is B-A-Y, isn't it? L-E-Y, Frank Bailey's. This Bill Bailey, we used to call him, conceived an idea in which to make a blower, like a stove. And he made it out of tins, out of these milk tins, dried milk tins. And he made this little blower with a fan inside of it, driven by two tin lids, used to join together, and then have a bootlace running round from one wheel to another with an handle on. You used to turn it like this, and this fan inside this milk tin used to blow up inside this blower, inside the nozzle of this blower, and you could burn anything on it. You used to put tin on the top and boil water in a crack. You used to have this blower going, and he used to make these for everybody in the camp, which had to pay him in cigarettes or in food. You see, he'd got a real good business on. He was one of the businessmen, he was, in the camp. And he made a clock, and fellas used to draw rice puddings and Christmas puddings on the wall, and then they used to run at them, and used to do all manner of things. And it was during this time, as we were all interested in this, that this chap came up into number 11 hut this particular day and said, was there a Lance Corporal Armitt there? And well, I says, I'm Armitt, I said, but no Lance Corporal. Oh, he said, you must be the one. Your name's Armitt? I says, that's me. He said, well, you wanted down at the camp commandant's office. Thought, well, good heavens, what have we done now? So down I goes down to the commandant's office, and he said, can you write? Oh, I said, certainly I can write. And he said, well, let me have a specimen of your handwriting. So I showed him a specimen of my handwriting. He gave me a few sums, and I did those. And he said, oh, perfect, champion, right. You were here, you were in this office here. You were taking charge of the next of kin parcels and all the letters, the post. You'll be taking over as post corporal. There's that much coming in as the Italians couldn't, because we're under the Italians then, by the way.
Was there, sorry to get off the point, was there a lot of difference between the Italians and the Germans?
Oh yes, yeah. The Germans were far better than the Italians.
Yeah. Far even...
More humane.
Yeah.
They treated you, mind you, I've skipped some out to which I ought to told you earlier on. When we were at this food depot, you know me telling you about the food depot where we used to sabotage the tins? Well, it was there that we were being fed by the Italians, Italian guards, but working for the Germans in a German food camp, food store. And this, one of these days, he used to come round with a horse and cart, the Italians had, with the food. He used to still bring it in the old-fashioned way of an oil drum with all the spaghetti and all that mixed in, and the minestra and the pasta shoot and all man's bloody thing, all in this big drum. And they used to serve it by a ladle. You used to have to step up to the back of the cart, and you used to flop it into your Dixie can, and it was only like water, and that was your food. Well, on one of these occasions they were serving out the dinner, there were several German officers watching, and we could see that they were talking amongst themselves about what we were getting. And they didn't do anything that day, but the following day, when they came, they were there when the cart came in, and there we started to queue for this. Anyway, by the time the first one went to get his meal, these officers simply walked forward, got onto the cart, caught hold of the barrel and tipped it out, tipped it on the ground, it all ran out, all on the floor. Then they collected all us up together and took us to the German mess room. They moved all the Germans over to one side of the mess room and put us on the other, and we had the same food as the Germans were having. They said if we were working for them, they couldn't expect us to work on the type of food as they were giving us, and their own, the Germans, were getting the best food and they were doing their work, so we should have the same. And they started to issue us out then with 12 cigarettes, 6 sweets, 2 cigars and a bar of chocolate. That was, and a quarter pound of cheese. That was every day. They gave us that, the Germans did, while we were working for those. And they fed us up champion, and they were really, really good to us, they were. And even the German soldiers that we came in contact with, the older persons, that the people of his own age then, they couldn't talk discreetly to you. They had to do it in very discreetly, I should say. They had to do it very discreetly to you, and they had to do it in well, they couldn't do it openly. They had to take you behind somewhere to talk to you because they were afraid of the German officers, you see. But they used to speak to us and talk to us about the war and what good was it to them and what good it was to us. Because you must understand this, as the Germans were taught English. They were taught English in the schools, and 80% of them could speak English, where we couldn't speak German, and so they could converse with us. And they were dead set against the war just as we were. But they didn't like the Italian. And as I say, they took over from us. They took us from the Italians and fed us. But at night time we were taken back to the Italian camp. And
yeah, sorry to interrupt you. You were saying you were on the post.
Oh yes, I was the post corporal. Yes, they made me the post corporal. Right, I did this for 2 or 3 days. Then it came to light, which was you got a photograph of the fella, of the Sergeant Major, as I gave you, Staff Sergeant Sergeant Major Aylett, who was in charge of the complete camp. He was in charge of the complete camp on the prisoner side, and it was this Sergeant Major Aylett had sent up for me, but instead of sending up for me, he should have sent for Lance Corporal Attrell, which was Jock Attrell, you see. Well, he got me when he looked through the ledger and found out where the names, he'd taken my name instead of Jack Attrell's, you see. So they had to send them for Jack Attrell. So then Jack comes down, and he said, "You've got my job." And the Sergeant Major come and said, "Well, you'd got his job." He said, "It's rather unfortunate, because you were having double rations and it should have been Jack as was getting them." So he says, "Oh, never mind that." He says, "We could do with 2. He said, "So both of you stop on." So that left Jack and I as the post corporals. And it was our job, as the mail came in, we used to have to go down outside of the camp to collect the mail from the local post office. And 6 guards with 2 of us. 6 guards used to take us down to this post office. We used to collect the post and the next of kin parcels, bring them all back to the camp. Then it was our job to sort them out in the various up numbers, where they were, you see, some in from 1 right up to 12. So many in number 1, so many in... Jack did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. I did 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 and 12. He did one side and I did the other of the camp, because there were 144 in each hut, and 144 in that, you see, and then each side. Well, I did one side and Jack did the other. We used to have to go round to the, and you'd have them all here, and you'd have the various hut numbers as you'd parcel them all up together, and you knew everyone in that camp. We knew everyone, Jack and I did, and they used to come out, none for you, and they used to think it was our fault. You used to go mad with us because we no letters for them and no next to kin parcels, and we had really a good job there, Jack and I did, because we were enemies of the lot as didn't get none, and we were friends of them as we did, you know. And it was nothing to do with us, because we used to let them have. We used to take them as they came. And the same applied when the next of kin parcels came. We weren't allowed to issue those out. We used to put them in order in the various huts, and then the Italian commandant and his aide, they used to be at the table while we were there, and to say, well, this is so-and-so's, and we'd give it to him, and we should shout out Frank Bailey or something like that. Next kin parcel, Frank Bailey, army number. He'd come forward to the table, then the camp commandant would open it. He would open it, have a look what was in it, confiscate what he wasn't allowed to have. Same as shirt, well, they used to confiscate nearly everything. Boots and shoes and everything as they would do for the Italians, they used to confiscate and take it, and you all used to go in a separate hut on its own to be collected when the war was over, but they never did. It was all stolen, see. And that's what used to happen there. Then I got very, very pally with that Sergeant H.L. Jones from Huey Jones, who lives at Potter's Bar, and he was a regular soldier, and you must bear in mind this: we, Jack and I, and one or two more, possibly another 20 more, were having sufficient to survive on. We were getting sufficient to survive on, but the remainder of the camp weren't. They were only getting this, and we used to try and get them a little bit extra if we could. But I got very pally with this Sergeant Jones, and he killed the commandant's dog first. Firstly, he killed the commandant's dog, and he cut it up, and he cooked it in the cookhouse. And he hung the liver up and everything, and we had stewed it up, and it was marvellous, just like eating rabbit. And that was a good meal, that was. And then a few weeks later...
How many of you ate?
Oh, about 6 of us, about 6.
Yeah.
That was out of number 12, but I was in number 11, they were in number 12. And we ate this dog, and it was lovely. And then a few weeks later, he caught the cat, the camp commandant's cat. Well, now, even in those surroundings and in that environment as we were living, there were still some people there who was dead set in their ways, and dead set as we were doing. We were cannibals, they used to call us, and used to call us all manner of things. And when he caught this cat, it was just on early morning parade. He'd caught it, and he caught it just prior to the parade, as everybody had to go out in the morning and be checked up, see. So he threw it under his bed. He'd killed it, wrung its neck and chucked it under his bed. Sergeant Jones had. Well, when he came back, the cat had gone. The room orderly, there used to be a room orderly left behind, the room orderly had found this cat and chucked it into the toilet. Well, the toilets weren't these toilets. There were holes in the ground, like Indians have. There were holes in the ground and little armrests on the side like that, as you used to bend down, little armrests on. earthenware pipe it was. You know these earthenware pipes about 6 inches wide? Well, it was one of those that went down to the bottom. And he chucked it down one of those, this cat. Well, when Sergeant Jones come back, he went berserk because somebody's pinched this cat. And he wanted to know where to go. And he said he chucked it down the bloody toilet. And there was 6 in a row, and he didn't know which one to go to, and he went rooting in every one. With his arm, big stick and all that. Went rooting till he eventually found it. He pulled it out there, out the toilet. This is perfectly true, I'm telling you. He went and washed it under the tap. And he went and washed it under the tap. And he cut it open and bellied it just like a rabbit. Skinned it just like a rabbit and cooked that. And it was just like a rabbit. It was beautiful, that was.
Did the commandant...
Oh, I think went mad because he didn't know we'd had it, mind you, but I think he had a guest on it a bit later on. I think he got a whisper. Anyway, as the months progressed, they started on these escape tunnels. One in number 11 and one in number 12. Now, us, being on this post, corporal, being on the internal post, we hadn't a great deal to do with this, although we knew who was in on it. But we were also drawn lots, so we were allowed to draw lots. When the time come to go, we had to draw lots out of a bally, and so many as were willing to go could draw out of a hat in which order to go through, because the first to go through would always be the best. Anyway, they started number 1 in the one in number 11, one in number 12, and there was also a real good one going off in number 1, which had got a concrete flag floor. Now ours were wooden floors, but the one in number 1 hut and 2 hut were concrete flagged floors, and that one, as they got, was perfect. That was. They timed theirs to go through. They got electric lighting and everything to come out into the Red Cross parcel shed, which was outside the grounds, outside the big 25-foot wall. Outside there, and they timed it to get through there and break up into that and fill all the necessary, what they need for their escape, see. And that was a real precision movement, that was a real good one. And they got away out of that, but they were captured. But one in number 11 was going, one in number 12 was going. They let them know about number 11. Gave them a bit of an inkling that one was going in number 11, but the Italians never took the notice of it. Until we had a blessed kind of a monsoon. It rained and thundered and it was... You could read a paper at night when the used lighting. You could read a paper at night. It caved in. All the water bloody flooded and caved the bugger in. Well, then we had a job of filling it up. And all the soil that had been used had been shoved underneath the foundations of the hut. And also it had been brought out and deposited over the grounds. And it had been brought out in only little cups and things. It was marvellous how it was done. But the one in number 12 was going, which they never knew about. And they got within, I think they got within about a mile, within about a yard of breaking through when they were seized on, when it was stopped. But just after this, while this was on, there was a rumour going round in the camp that all medical personnel were being repatriated in exchange for their prisoners. Well, this set a lot of hopes going, and which there was quite a number as did get exchanged, because we had letters from them, from England, to say that they were back safely at home and we were there doing this, and they'd had a real exchange, and this worried us a great deal. And to think as they'd been with us only a few weeks previous and they were back home. Then they came round asking for volunteers for working parties. If there's anyone there who could drive a tractor. Well, I put my hand up as oh yes, I can drive a tractor. Oh well, you were employed here. You're all right. Oh no, I want a working party. And there's 11 men and me as a tractor driver to go out in the rice fields. We didn't know we were going into the rice fields, by the way. And Frank Bailey was one of these. And away we went. They took us to this place called Cheranova. We went there, and it was Camp 146. And when we got to it, it was an old piggery. It was a piggery. Just the stalls in it, and it was never been cleaned or anything. We had to clean it all up, and it housed, how many did it hold? I should say it hold 20 or 30. Because there was 2 or 3 working parties, you see, and they were in various areas. And we were on this this little farm at Cheranova. Oh, I forget what it is. Cantoni, I think his name was. Cantoni, I think the farmer's name was. Anyway, we went out there, the march was off, and I went as a tractor driver, and all the other lads were making. We were in a great silo the first day. I'll never forget it. We had to go in a great big tall silo, and when they brought the hay, they were shoving this in through the holes inside of the silo, and it was our job to keep on. Well, I was in on that one, jumping down on. Well, then we were pressing this down, and this is where the guards tried to teach us that song, "O Solo Mio." Have you heard that one? "O Solo Mio." They tried to teach us that. However, that was the first day. Now the second day, they put us on this, me on the tractor, Frank and these other pals, out on the rice fields, up into the waist with water. About 60 girls in front, all planting these rice plants, which were out on a little island. They used to bring them out with horses and these oxen, pull them on little floating sledges, I should say, and then they'd go plonk them out to these girls. They'd plant them out, and you could recognise each girl from the rear view. After you'd seen the face, once you knew which one was the one when you looked at the rear view, which was very, very unsettling for us to see these, because we hadn't had any physical contact with any girls for a number of years. However, this carried on for several months, I should think. We were edge cutting, we were edge badgering, clearing the ditches out, and all manner of things, until there was a rumour that the Italians were breaking up in the war. Then we saw a possibility that if this happened, we should be able to get away. Well, the day did eventually come when the Italians, they were very lax in what they were doing, because they were really more afraid of the Germans than what we were. And eventually we went out of the camp. Away we went. No one knew where they were going. So we went into this small village where we worked. But prior to escaping, I had got very friendly with this young lad's Ernesto. I think his name was also Cantoni. His father and his sister. Her name was Josephina, which is Josephine in our language. And I think she had a bit of a crush on me. And because well, I had 13 kissing me all at the same time, at one time. And they had said to me, if ever there was a chance of you escaping, come to my place. We'll fix you up. So that's what I did. I went there.
On your own?
Yes, I was on my own then. I went there, and they fixed me up with clothing. They gave me a meal and clothing, and they sewed some lira in the lining of the coat that they'd given to me. But they were very, very concerned about me being there, and the quicker I got away from there, the better they'd feel. Anyway, I got away from there. They turned me away from there. And I went to another little cottage, and this is where I finally ends up with Frank, Jock, and several others. And we slept in a barn that night. Well, for several nights we slept in the barn, and being fed by the local inhabitants during the day. Here they got quite a lot of arguments amongst ourselves. He was going to do this and I was going to do that, and so on and so on, and he was coming with me, and this is what we got. Anyway, I made contact with one of the working girls that were there. Her name was Rosa Francia, and she had her sister Narina. Now Rosa was 22, Narina was 19, and they all worked for this farmer that we had gone to work for from the prison camp. Now they put Frank and I, Frank was with me then, in a loft in their outhouses. Well, I got very thick with this Rosa, who had had a child by a local youth, which was against their social life kind of thing, and she was virtually an outcast from the church. And to pay for our meal there, I had to tread the grapes there. I can't remember Frank ever doing this, but I had to tread the grapes there in a long wooden vat, about a yard high, about a foot wide in the bottom, and it ran down to a sieve at one end, and then into another vat. And they kept pouring these grapes in, and we kept walking up and down them, and she was in and I was in. And she went one way and I followed up the back, and then we turned round and so on. This is how we were. But we were not allowed to do it without observation, without being seen, you see, because I was taking a getting a real crush on this girl. And however, after this, I was taken into the house. I think the parents could see something going on, but I wasn't content with just having the one. I wanted the other as well, this Narina. And they got like a bit of a fight between the two. One was, as I say, one was 19 and Rose was 22. And the parents used to try and separate me from them. At first I was in between them, and I was trying to get at both of them at the same time. And this is where I asked them to make us risolati, which is rice made with milk, you know, like the milk puddings. And they did make me rice milk puddings with the rice and the milk. And they said they didn't like it. Anyway, I added what was there. Now Frank was left alone up in this loft while I was doing this, and I think Frank felt this a little bit, because we had to leave him up there and then take the ladder away from the wall, save anyone going up, and Frank was up there. Anyway, I kept going back to him. Well, from there things got a little hot there from then. People got to know as we were hanging around there. Germans were close by. They were all feared or frightened of us getting caught on their premises, because there'd been posters put out, anyone harbouring prisoners of war, escaped prisoners of war, would be shot from the children upwards, commencing from the children upwards. And they all got afraid of this. So they didn't want a great lot to do with us. And along comes Domenico Lunghi, Franco Lunghi, and the Lunghi family, which kept a farm farther down the road. And they took us to this small cottage at the end of the village, where this Giovanni, I don't know what his other name was, and they put us up in his bedroom. It was only a two-roomed house, one up and one down, and he was always downstairs. I think he must have been an ex-jailbird or something, I do, because he never worked. I don't know where he ever got his money from. But we were kept in complete silence. No facilities for washing or toiletry or anything of that. And we were kept up there for weeks. And he was feeding us once a day. And this was at night time. And we had to be kept quiet, and he was singing all day long. All day long he was singing. And he was singing that song. I'll never forget it. Possibly Frank's told you about it. Vicino al Monte. And it kept going, Vicino al Monte, Vicino al Monte, tra la 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 la, tra la 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 la. This is how we used to go. Veni, 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 qua, 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 tanti baci crida, tanti baci crida. This is how he was all the time, all day long. That's how we got to know it.
How many of them were you? You and
This,
Frank?
there was Frank, Jack Hamilton,
And the two.
Fred Pike, and another one, Bob something. There was 6 of us in that room, and it was terrible. It was deplorable. This was up there, because instead of being friendly together, they weren't friendly at all. It was kind of survival of the fittest. And periodically, this Domenico and Franco and a friend of theirs, I don't know what his name was, used to come down and bring us cigarettes at night time. Only at night time, 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And they used to bring us these things down, and we used to smoke them. And then they used to go away and say he'd come again, and it must have been very, very hard for those, because he was keeping this chap down below, the whole family of Franco's was keeping this chap to feed us, and I can't see why I should have done it, because we meant nothing to them. They were only doing this out of goodness of heart, I think. And this went on for some time. I can't tell you exactly when it was, but we must have been there several weeks and weeks, I think. And 2 children came into this Giovanni's house one day. Oh, we had the fright of his life. As I say, it was only one up and one down. And he was outside, this Giovanni was, and these 2 children had come down. They come in the house, and they'd open the bedroom door, the stair door, and they'd come up about three or 4 steps. And it was only about 8 steps high, and then it was straight onto the bedroom floor. And we were there, petrified we were, because if we'd have been seen, that'd have been it, you see. But anyway, he came and he was shouting and going mad about these children being up there. And then he was really worried in case they had seen us. And he came up wondering whether we said, oh no, they hadn't seen us. And he wasn't satisfied at that. And this worried him. This really worried him. I think he put the pressure then onto the Lungies to get rid of us. Because a few nights afterwards, they came, hey, have one of these. A few nights afterwards they came and told us we'd got to go. So we said, well, where are we going to go? They tried to explain to us where to go, and we hadn't a clue where to go. And we were to go at 5-minute intervals from the house, 5-minute intervals. Then there came the draw who was going to go first. And I think that Bob and that Fred Pike were the first to go out.
Had you decided to split up, yes? Or?
No, we hadn't decided to split up then. And they said they'd all make their own way from there, you see. When we came out of this house, everybody made their own way. It was left entirely to themselves. They'd all go their own ways, as it wouldn't be right for see 6 of us all together. Anyway, when we came out, Frank was waiting on the little path. Jack Attle was there. We were all there. So then there's still the 6 of us together on this path at midnight.
Had they given you clothing and the?
Oh no, we'd already got this. We'd
Yeah,
already got
and the
this.
money. Yeah.
And I had,
Yeah.
but the others hadn't. I don't know what they'd got. They'd got army clothing. Frank had got army clothing. I'd got civilian clothing.
Italian army or?
No, the British Army, which they'd had come from the camp with, you see. Then we walked into this church. Went into this church to see the father, the priest. Because my mother had always said, if you're ever in any trouble, take refuge in a church. So I went into church, went into Cheranova, walked in there, we saw the father, and he asked if there was any Catholics amongst us. Well, there's only one, and that was Frank. And he said he couldn't help any Protestants. He didn't like the idea of Protestants. And Frank was all right because he was a Catholic. Anyway, he wanted to change his religion. I said, I don't care what they change me into. They can change me into anything. I said, as long as I get help. Anyway, he decides to look after us. And
Did he make you a Catholic?
Well, I don't know whether he went through a bit of form of a, what's it sayings like as we were Catholics or something. Anyway, he took us up into this belfry, this church. Oh, dear, up into the door. Oh, we were going up there and up, and we'd never seen nothing so dusty and filthy, and there was rats and mice and everything up there. And it was round like that, half circular, semicircular, round like that on the top. Then there was heave, like the point at the above, like the apex. And we were in between there. And you could see there's bells a bit here by the tower of the steeple, like in the bell tower. You could walk alongside of that and look right over the Lombardy Plains and see out. And we're up there for weeks. And this Ernesto Cantoni, the father, came up a time or two and brought us big long tobacco leaves, like this. And we used to have that and cut them up into shreds with a razor blade and smoke them in any old type of paper. I used to use a diary paper. I'd got a diary which I'd used, but with running out of paper, I used the diary. And the old father, the priest, used to send us a bucket full of rice up, a white bucket, and it used to be half full of minestra or risotto or any kind of their native food. We used to pull it up on a rope and swing it in, and by the time we got it, there used to be a skin on it like forms on top of a rice pudding. We used to have to peel that off because it was all the muck and dust that had collected on its way up. I used to share it out. Ooh, and it was like sharing gold out there. Even one little piece of rice was, if you put more than nothing, it was hell up. However, this carried on for some time.
You see, I think you got on each other's nerves a bit.
Well, you did, yes, you did, yeah. You see, because you got to make water on top of the church. And if you wanted to do your motions, you see, you got to go still on top of the church. Oh, and it stunk terrible. After so long, oh, really terrible. But mind you, you couldn't, your motions, you couldn't pass your motions correctly because you'd had no fats in your body and no exercise. And I have known the time when you had to insert your fingers into your rectum to pull it out away from you because it was that hard, you see, with no exercise, no fats in your body. And after so long, I can't remember when this was, but I know as they came up one day and was very, very worried that we should have to go from there because there was a little dog, there were some cottages adjacent to the church. There was a little dog there who kept coming out and looking up at the church and barking. And he was afraid that the dog was giving the show away, as he'd want to know what the dog was there barking up there for all the time, you see. So he got very worried. So he asked us if we'd go. We said, oh no, we didn't mind going. We'd go, but where we were going to go to. And he gave us an address in which to go to, which was his brother's. Or, no, Franco's family's brothers. At a farm, farther of miles away. But he'd give us the directions. But he said, before you go, before I let you out at night, come down into my study, he says, and you can hear the news from London. And we went down, and at night we all got down by the side of his fireplace, and by the side of the fireplace he lifted up a kind of a carpet and lifted up a radio out of the in the crevice like that below. And we listened to radio news and heard Lord Orhaw speaking. And that gave us good hope because we didn't know what was going on over in England, you see. So,
you didn't get the BBC, you got...
oh yes, we got we got London, our BBC, and if you remember, well, I don't suppose you would remember, Lord Orhaw used to break in on these programmes. So he used to break in on these programmes.
Do you remember what it said on the news?
I can't remember, no, I can't remember, but I think it said as as there've been so many raids over London and so many raids over Coventry and so on, you know. And then, oh, it was on about Russia as well. I remember it being on about Russia because we said, oh, Russia will win the war. And then we went from there, and we followed these instructions, and we eventually came up to this place. We didn't know whether that was the right place or not, but we went into it, and it was like a big. We went through an archway, and like a big square quadrangle inside, and there was houses and farm buildings all round, like in a kind of a fort. Went in there, knocked at one of these doors, and we went in, and the young lady of the house said, oh, my husband's at work, I don't know what to do, I don't know what, he was out or something, he wouldn't be at work, but he'd be out. I'll have to put you in here. So she shoved us in a little place where they kept all the sticks and all the rubbish, like, you know. They shoved us in there and left us in there for hours. Well, during this time, there was no facilities for us to urinate or anything like that, and we were bursting. So I said to Frank, have a look in there, Frank, see if there's any bottles or anything we could do it in. And we rooted round, and Frank did eventually find some bottles, and he gave me one of these bottles, and I started doing in this bottle, and the bottle wasn't big enough. The bottle started laughing. Well, making us laugh, we started the motions for them back as well. Well, we were in a state. I was there, made away, and couldn't wash yourself, and oh, bloody terrible. It all dried on us. Oh. Anyway, at night, when her husband came, he fetched us out of there, and they were roasting chestnuts in front of a stick fire, open hearth, and we all sat round, and they got all chestnuts all over, and they were roasting. It must have been around about Christmas time, wouldn't it? Just after. Oh, to be after Christmas. Oh, to be after Christmas, had to be. It would be just after January, February to be. Roasting, eating these damn things. And then they turned us out from there. Oh, no, they put us up into the bedroom. And while we were up in this bedroom, we went through all the pockets of, in the wardrobes, in everything, looking for cigarette ends and things. Couldn't find none. Emptied the pockets out, of the dust out of the pockets, and then rolling that into a fag and in the bedroom. Anyway, they made us come out of there because they wanted to go to bed now, and they put us in another little place for the day. And then at night time they turned us away from there. We had to set off again, and that's where we were then. We were wandering by day, sleeping by day, wandering by night.
Still the 6 of you?
Still the 6. Until we come to a place, into like a big barn in a field. We all went into this. This is where the argument started, as we couldn't get food for everybody, see. It was difficult to get food for everybody. Now Jack Attrell and myself could speak a bit of Italian. I could pass it as Italian, but Frank was a bit very light. Frank was very fairish then, and couldn't speak much Italian. And even if he could speak a few words, he couldn't carry himself through because you'd have known straight away, because he was wearing army boots, great big army boots. He was wearing a big army overcoat, army tam. He looked the full thing as we thought of joining the guerrillas. Anyway, this is where the argument started, as we should split up, and that was for Frank and I to go together, this Fred and Bob to go together, Jock Attrell and Jack Hamilton to go together. So these two went first, this Fred Pike and
Oh.
Bob, they went first. Then it was our turn to go, mine and Frank's. And I said, well, what's the use of splitting up? I said, if we split up, I said, we may only all get caught. So we all may as well get caught together as get caught in twos. So it was agreed upon then as we should go together. And with no form of map reading at all, and Jack said, well, he said, there's only one thing we can follow, and that's the North Star. Jack Hattle said. So then we said, right, we'll follow the North Star. Jack pointed it out to us, and away we went. Well, we kept on, sleeping rough, feeding rough, getting in hen coats, pinching eggs, doing all manner of things, and wandering up and down, and eventually we got to a place where we met someone, and they said, oh, we mustn't go there because of it's consolidated by Germans. So we put on a duck shoot in the middle of like a lake. They rowed us across in a boat, and we're on this duck shoot for several days, and they kept bringing food out to us. And then we pulled off there. We must have been around somewhere around Milan from there, because we didn't know how to get round Milan. We knew where the North Star was, but to follow it, we would got to go right through Milan. So we devised an idea of walking through the sewers, and we went through the sewers, and eventually we came out the other side into a little wood.
How did you know to keep going straight through the sewers?
Well, we didn't. We just kept going, you know.
Yeah.
We just kept going, see where it would bring us to.
Yeah.
And it eventually brought us out into a little wood.
I think it was dark.
Love,
Must
no,
have been dark down there.
It was dark, oh yes,
Dark.
but I mean it was kind of light. Somehow there was the ventilation shafts coming through,
Yeah.
and there was a trickle of water about a yard wide, with the usual sewage, you know. And we came out there, and it was lovely sunshine. I don't know what time of day it was, but it must have been round about dinner time at 2 o'clock-ish. And we come out and we lay on the bank side. And while we were there on the bank side, some children came round us. And we thought, oh well, this is it now. They're bound to go and tell their parents, which they did. Now within a very short time there was half the village there. Well, they might have been, I don't know, we must have been some very important people, because they fetched vino and stuff, they fetched food, and they brought it, and we drank it till we were that drunk we didn't know where the devil we were. We had his hair cut there. They washed his clothing in a stream. We stripped off and they washed his clothing, these women did, in a stream. And it wasn't long in drying. We put it back on again, and oh, they gave us real good treatment there. And then they put us right again, loaded us up with food, and away we went again. And we came to a railway crossing. It must have been the Milan railway. Electrified it was. And we drew lots on which to go over first. And I was the last. I was the last to go over. And we had to step over in between the lines, because in case you stood on an electric line, live line. Eventually met up the other side, walked a matter of about a quarter of a mile. We came across a river. We had to go through that. Half swim and half paddle. We got across that. Then we had
the autobahn. Well, no, it wouldn't be the autobahn, to be the... Well, it was like an autobahn, it'd be one of the big freeways in Italy. We had to get over that, and there was lights going and all that as we went across. And then we had a canal to go over. Well, not a canal, but these irrigation canals, you know, where they flood we had those to cross. And then we had a level crossing to go over. And we've been walking up this road for a considerable time, and it was beginning to get very light. It was like kind of a moonlight, you know, and get very, very light and casting shadows. There was long, big, tall poplars in the trees in the roads, outside the road, and they were casting great shadows along the, and we were like hopping in between the shadows to keep in the shadow. And we heard someone coming up the road, and luckily for us there was a ditch on the side and a culvert, you know, on the culvert. Lucky for us, luck must have been in his way, because we dived down into the ditch, and there's a culvert there. We just dived in the culvert and waited until they'd all gone past, and they got out again and away to go again.
Were they soldiers or civilians?
Don't know what they were. Ever so many of them. Anyway, we went through there, and then we got into some hencoats again. Stole the eggs and drank the eggs, and then round about, must have been early hours of the morning, around 3 or 4 o'clock, we'd just about had enough, and we said, come on, he said, look at that, there's a shed down in the field, look, let's go and see what's in there, let's get down to that. So I all went down to that. We opened the door, and it was full of dry sticks, like branches of trees, and we got on the top of that, and we all went to sleep. Well, in the early hours of the morning, say about 8 o'clock in the morning, we heard these children come in here to collect these sticks. These children have come in to collect these sticks. And oh, where we lay there like that, Dad looked down, and then they saw his feet. They set up such a squeal. The parents were ploughing or something, doing something in the fields, and they came across when they heard the children screaming. And we all had to get up then and get out, and said, who were you? We said, we escaped prisoners of war. Where were you going? He said, oh, we're trying to get to Switzerland. Oh, you never get to Switzerland, he said. It's patrolled by carnies, that was dogs, patrolled by carni and Tedeschi, Germans, patrolled by them, you'll never get there. And we said, well, where are we? He said, you're at a place called Villa Daddy. And he said, well, come with us. He said, we'll put you right. Well, we didn't know whether they would or whether they wouldn't, but we went with them. And took us into this big house. They fed us. And they said, now you'll wait here until a guide, we'll get you a guide tonight. Come here at 8 o'clock, he'll come at 8. Put you in this other room, so they shoved us in another place. And we were waiting till 8 o'clock. We didn't know whether it was going to be a guide, or whether to be the police or the Germans. We got trust of this, see. Anyway, true enough, he came at night. See him coming now, I can, big jack boots on and leather coat and kind of a leather hat. And he asked us what property we owned in England. I said, I don't own no property. I said, I don't own no property. He said, well, would you sign a paper that all your worldly goods that you've got in England, all your credits and all your army credits and all that, you will turn over to me if you make good your escape. I said, I don't care a devil what I sign as long as we get through. So he made this kind of a thing out and signed it. Turned everything over to him.
Did he ever claim it?
Oh no, he never claimed it. So anyway, we set off at night. We followed him, and he took us to Lake Como. We couldn't have been far from Lake Como then, like when he set off, because I don't think we've been walking above an hour at the most. And just before we got there, he told us to take our shoes off. What we got on, take our shoes off, walk barefoot down to the lakeside. He's pinching a boat. So we went and pinched this boat. And I was carrying 2 books, The Crowthers of Bank Dam and The Forsyte Saga. Carried them all the way. Books that thick, 1,000-odd pages in them. I carried other stuff besides. I don't know why, but I carried all that, lugged that all about with me. And got us in this boat. None of us could row. We tried paddle it. Tried all manner of things. Put our hands in and tried row it like that. Eventually we got going and we turned around in circles. We got to follow a light as was opposite the other bank. The other side. There's a light shining. We've got to follow that and get out of that. And we eventually get across there. We got out. Someone there. And they put us on it was like walking up into heaven. Going up, hundreds of steps we walked up. And then we found ourselves onto the goat tracks on the mountainside. And we walked up and walked and walked and walked. And we began to get into the snow. And Frank was failing by this time. Frank was. And we'd gone on ahead and left Frank. He was up side of the, what's it like? Oh, go without me, go without me. So I went back for him. And I half lifted him and half carried him up. He was jiggered, Frank was. And we gets, I don't know how long we've been travelling, but we'd been up there some time. And we came across this like a cover, like a kind of a shed dug into the side of the mountain, and it was full of sheep. We went in there. They put us in there and slept with the sheep, keep us warm. And above this was this little house we went to. And when we got there was about 11 Jews and goodness knows what in there as well, all waiting for passage across into Switzerland. Anyway, we had to do some more signing up there. I don't know what we signed, but they wanted all the money as we got. And the overcoat as I'd got, instead of ripping it out and give it them, I took my coat off and gave them the coat and said it was inside that. So they had the coat that left me with just a jacket and a shirt, as when it got wet used to go like cardboard, and a pair of calico underpants and no trousers.
No, what had happened to your trousers?
I'd lost them. All them had gone, we'd worn out they had. And Frank had got a pair of dancing shoes on. The shoes that I'd got on were no better, but they were tied on with a wire. The sole was tied on with a wire to the hopper. And as the farther we got up, so the fog got very dense, very icy, and we had to travel by an handkerchief knotted, and I had one end and Frank the other, and that's how we walked across the dangerous parts. And you had to feel your way across. All those hundreds of feet below.
You had a guide, I mean somebody was with you to show you the way?
Oh no, not then.
No?
Oh no, not then. And we eventually arrives up to the Italian frontier, which was all lit up onto the frontier post, you know, onto the wire. Shut up. Anyway, there was some in the vicinity. There was the sentry boxes, I should say about 20 yards apart, and they looked desolate. You know, they were desolate. But over to his left was I should say was a big ammunition place, because it was all lit up, and you could see the guards on the top of it with the searchlights. And we got to this wire. It was like pig netting. We lifted it up and crawled underneath it, and then there was all this wire entanglement. We had to get through that. Now we're in no man's land then, and now we got to walk over this and get through into the Swiss frontier. And it was just like getting into there like it was going into Italy, getting out of Italy. Getting into Switzerland was like getting out of Italy. And it was April 1st, 1944 then, 2 o'clock in the morning when we got in there, a lovely moonlight night.
How wide was the no man's land bit between the two wires?
Oh, it was a fair step. Fair step. I should say about a mile, I should say. 3/4 of a mile, I should say. And then we got into there, and we sat on the mountainside, and we'd see lights, and we could see a river that the moon was reflecting into the river down at the bottom, and you could see lights, this light coming up the mountainside. We thought, well, what the devil is this? And when he came up to us, he said, "Halton, Halton." I said, "Good Christ," I says, "we're in bloody Germany." And because when we looked at him, he was just like a German, because he was dressed up in German clothing, German helmet, German clothing. I said, "Good Christ, we're in bloody Germany." And he shone his torch on his buttons, and there was a red cross on it. So, oh, we're in Switzerland. And he said, "Have you got any cigarettes?" I said, "Man, I got nothing." And he gave us some players, and we sat there and smoked it. He says, "I'm sorry, we have no form of transport," he says, "but you'll have to walk to our outpost." Well, then there was some Jews as had come in, you see, same time, and they split us up from them, and we were in this outpost, and they gave us mint tea, and green tea it was. And then the following morning they took us down to this little village, I can't remember the name of that town. They took us there into an hotel, and they put us in the centre of the room, because we're that lousy, and covered us with blankets, and people were coming round looking at us as we lay on the floor. And they came and gave us tea again and biscuits, and we wanted a lot of food, you know, and they said, "We don't give it to you, you'll have to build you up slowly." And then they marched us through the town, and as we were going through the town, people were watching us as we were going through the town and looking at the size of his feet, and looking at what size of clothing we should take, and they were coming out with drinks on trays, and as we walked through, we were drinking this, and with people behind with a barrow finishing up with all the stuff being collected for us on the back. And there was hordes of people running down the sides of us as we walked down. And then they took us to a cleansing centre. I went into this cleansing centre, and they shaved all the hair off us on his body, and a great big tub of soft soap, and a big ladle, and he plonked some on top of his head and underneath his arms, underneath his crutch, and then we had to go into a steam room and steamed us and bathed us, And as we came out, then from there, they took us into changing rooms and give us fresh clothing and all new smart clothing. And as we came out the other end, there was a big mirror at the end before we came out, and you looked at yourself, you didn't know yourself. And then they took us for a meal, a light meal, and said we got to go into quarantine for 28 days. So then they took us up into the mountains to a big hotel. I can't remember the name of that. We were up there 28 days.